Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of the Canadian Story. I'm excited to have my good friend Josh Andrus on. Josh, do you want to introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us a little bit about Project Confederation?
Yeah, my name's Josh Andrus. I'm the executive director of Project Confederation. We are an independent third-party organization seeking a better deal for Alberta in whatever legal form that may take. We are essentially a subsidiary of a think tank, right-leaning libertarian think tank called the Alberta Institute, which is run by Peter McCaffrey. And we're still a relatively small organization. So if you want to go and give us some money, check us out at Project Confederation. I'll just get a little plug in there.
Just
Project Confederation. Check us out at projectconfederation.ca. The donate button's on the top right, and you can take a look in our news and some of the other things we've done. Sign up for our mailing list, stuff like that. So that's basically a little bit about what we are, and I'm sure throughout the interview you'll get a better idea of what we.
Oh, absolutely. But not just what do you do. Who are you, Josh?
Well, I'm a fourth generation Albertan. Actually, I'm one of those very few people that can say that all four of my grandparents were born in Alberta. I'm like Southern Alberta, Central Alberta, not so much Northern Alberta. I mean, I've spent some time up there, but I mean, 80 years ago, there wasn't much up in Northern Alberta anyways. No. I mean, I don't even think they got their first highway until after 1950.
No, exactly.
That's basically just a little bit about who I am. I got my start in the Wild Rose Party after the 2015 provincial election. It was actually after the federal election. I was in a Facebook argument with somebody and decided, I'm just going to call my MLA. I'm not happy. And then next thing I knew, I was on the board. And then next
That's
thing
how
I
it
knew,
happens, right?
there was a unity race. And Jason Kenney, I just, for whatever reason at the time, I felt Jason Kenney was the guy. I got behind his leadership race. And then shortly after, got recruited by Kevin Avram at Grassroots Alberta. Kevin Avram, of course, was the founder of the Canadian Taxpayer Federation. He hired Jason Kenney to run the Canadian Taxpayer Federation back in the early 90s, late 80s. And unfortunately, he had a seizure, and they had some brain tumors they found, and he had a surgery that went wrong and now has what they call aphasia, which means he can't communicate. Outside of, some very short sentences, which was difficult. And then, so I ended up leaving Grassroots Alberta around that time and, decided it was time to, it was Jason Kenney said that we were going to have Senate elections. And I thought to myself, that's not enough, man. That was really what did it for me. And so I did a bunch of research into the early days of the Reform Party, there's a good Richards and Pratt from 1951. They're a couple of political scientists that wrote a book. I read that. And I'm just sitting there like, when I was researching the Reform Party, I was reading columns from 1987 and 1986 and so on and so forth. And I'm reading it and I'm like, I just could have sworn I read this in the Calgary Sun today.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. Like, I mean, we all talk about how nothing's the same and everything's different. But no, in this case, like the issues that Western Canada has had with our overarching powers in Ottawa it's one of those things that this has been going on since 1905 and even before that. So, and it's not that I don't think it's malice maybe it was 100 years ago. I wasn't around, but it's just the system is designed in such a way to benefit Central Canada a little bit more than Western Canada, and people out here, like, all we really want is to be left alone, I think, and don't really get that opportunity. So.
No, we quite the opposite. We're constantly being told that we won't be left alone.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you could go into hundreds of years worth of history on that. I mean, the whole reason we became a province was a fight over, I think it was control over rail crown lands.
Yeah.
And Frederick Haltain, who is the minister or the premier of the Northwest Territories at the time, which encompassed everything that is. I think Manitoba was province at the time, so it was small, maybe.
Yeah, it was a little postage stamp of a province for a while. Yeah,
so
it was Rupert's Land, basically. Rupert's Land was the Northwest Territories. Yeah.
And so they were frustrated at their field. They felt alienated by Eastern Canada or Upper Canada, whatever you want to call it. And you ended up with a situation where they felt that they wanted provincial rights. And then they went and they got provincial rights because they became a province in 1905. And it was interesting because at the time there was going to be a single province of what now encompasses Alberta and Saskatchewan. And it was going to be called the Buffalo province, is what Haltain wanted. But Sir Wilfrid Laurier, who was longtime prime minister at the time, he decided that we weren't going to get a province of Buffalo, and he was going to divide it into two smaller provinces, specifically because he didn't want another major Anglo-speaking province that could dominate the interests of Quebec within Confederation. So in order to strike what I'm assuming he thought was a compromise, he decided that we were going to have two smaller provinces. And it makes it harder to get really both provinces on board with the exact same thing whenever you have a fight with Ottawa going on. I mean, you'll see it sometimes, but we even saw with the Court of Appeals of Alberta decision that the carbon tax was unconstitutional, whereas Saskatchewan Supreme Court essentially struck it down as constitutional.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's one of those things that if we had a single province, it might have been a little bit easier, like to get a rhythm and to get a step when you're going up against forces that you can't really fight against. So, I mean, and it even goes back, like the whole reason that Ottawa bought Rupert's Land was to use it as a colony to feed industrial interests in Ontario and Quebec. And so, like, it's the way that it's not necessarily like, I don't think that any of this is malicious. I just think that it's one of those things where, historically speaking, we are a colony. And, it's very difficult to break a pattern of behavior once it's set through the course of history. And that's kind of where we're at today.
And so what does a fair deal for Alberta look like in your mind?
Well, for me, we've got a lot of interest. Obviously, for me, it's changes to the electoral system. It's not necessarily, and like I said, it's not malice. Like, I don't think people in Ontario hate people, and maybe some Quebecers hate us, but sure, we deserve some of that. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind getting into it with them, but so it's one of those things where the way the system's designed, we have essentially the House of Commons dictates what happens in Canadian politics, and the way that the power is centralized in the House of Commons is that it is cabinet supremacy. And in the case of party discipline, you have everybody in cabinet is whipped to do what the prime minister's office wants. So what you have is essentially one person. And this was happening in Harper's government. I'm sure you could probably talk about that a bit.
Yeah, true.
Very much. It's going on very much in this government. But what you have is you have a government that's dominated by one party, by one person, and that person just so happens to be from a party that's elected largely by Quebec and Ontario. And that's just a product of the system. I mean, there's 338 seats in the House of Commons. There's 199 in Quebec and Ontario. Yeah, like alone. And that's I
think it's actually over 200 now.
Did they change it? I'm pretty sure it was 199. I'm pretty sure I looked at it.
Yeah, you're probably right. It's like, I think it is 121 and 78. So you're right.
Yeah. So you have like almost 2/3 of electoral seats in a centralized government based on two provinces. So naturally, you're going to have government policy and even party policy. Like you're seeing, there's a fight going on in the Conservative Party right now between Eastern and Western interests. And it's been going on for a long time. And when you have the a centralization of power to a single unit, like a legislative unit that is dictating its policy to benefit the majority of the population, you're going to have people feel like they're left out. And that's something that's going on. So in order to change that, one of the things that we've been looking at, and actually Brad Wall wrote a piece on this, I think it was yesterday. He was in the National Post. It was a really good article. And what we've been promoting it's called the Tripoli Senate. And it's an idea that the Reform Party was actually built on when they had their founding convention in 1987. They actually designed a party around this concept. Of course, it took a couple of years to get any footing, but in 1993, they effectively wiped the governing PCs right out of Western Canada. And but the Tripoli Senate idea is it changes the Senate so that it's an elected body. And Brad Wall actually kind of he went the other way. He said it doesn't necessarily have to be elected if the provinces can appoint.
Right.
And it's interesting, like the concept of an elected Senate or Senate reform, it's not new. I was reading sometimes I'll pick an era and I'll just go back and I'll burn the midnight oil and I'll read articles from that time period. In 1951, there was an attempted Senate reform from inside the Senate to have 1/3 of senators appointed by their provincial legislatures.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and that's another idea. And that was what Brad Wall was talking about in his column, was as opposed to having them elected, they're appointed by the provinces. It might be easier to get buy-in from the premiers in order to get the movement going, is was Brad's point. But at the end of the day, the Senate it's illegitimate. I mean, they're appointed by the Prime Minister and confirmed by the Governor General, and the provinces have no say. So what you have is if you have a party in power for a long period of time, you have a Senate dominated by one party.
Yes.
Because those are lifetime appointments. Or not
75,
but 75. Yeah. But yeah, like you have this situation where you have essentially an illegitimate body of government that is getting paid by the taxpayers to sit there and, rubber stamp policy coming out of the Prime Minister's office as endorsed by the Cabinet and the House of Commons. And so it creates a little bit of legitimacy, because if they have to face the electorate every 4 years, there's going to be, they're going to be a little bit more comprehensive, or they're going to pay more attention to what they're doing. So the other one, so there's 3 E's here. There's Tripoli Senate has elected, effective powers. Some would argue that if you just change the elected side, and that they might use their powers a little bit more often if the government is pushing policy that's unpopular, and they might not get elected. But essentially, yeah, you like I said earlier, you have a system of government that's designed of power coming out of the executive office of the Prime Minister, and you need to have somewhat of a check on that. And
yeah, there's no check right now, essentially.
No, I mean,
except for the Supreme Court, I guess.
Well, they're also appointed, so I mean, by the Prime Minister, yeah. So, yeah, we can get into that one, but so there is no check on comments, and so what you do by creating an effective second body is you add that check. Whereas if there's a policy that's unpopular in the Senate, they might actually shut it down, as opposed to right now, like, I mean, they're appointed. They're just, I don't even know the last time they actually did anything substantial in the Senate. And it's not that the senators are bad people. It's just, you have no legitimacy. So it's hard to, I mean, the minute you do something that's even controversial, like you open a can of worms of like, why are you there? Right?
Yeah.
What if you what's the point of what you're doing? And so you end up in a situation. But yeah, so you give it effective powers, and there is some argument that the powers they have now are effective. But I mean, that's something that everybody's going to have their own opinion on. And then the third one is equal, and equality is probably the most important aspect of the Tripoli Senate. It's the idea that, and it doesn't matter the specific number of senators. I don't know how many senators there are in the upper chamber. 100. Yeah. So you got 100 senators up there. So what you do is you create it so maybe there's 8 senators per province or / territory.
10 works.
10
I guess you gotta have the territories.
Yeah. I mean,
we don't want to treat them like a colony.
no, because they might want to separate. Could you imagine the territory seceding into Russia? Like, oh my goodness,
that would be very bad.
That would be very bad. We wouldn't want that. So yeah, you got to. So yeah, you create. It doesn't really matter how many senators per province, but that's probably the most important factor is equality, and by having a certain number of senators in that kind of a Senate would create that regional fairness in the sitting government. Now, the issue that we have in promoting this is none of the governments, not even provincial governments, have endorsed the idea.
Right.
The last provincial government that I'm aware that endorsed the idea was Don Getty and the PCs. Don, of course, was Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs in 1971 to 75 under Lougheed, so he was familiar with the whole fairness principle. But it's one of those things where, like, it's tough to justify the other aspects of a fair deal without getting fundamental reforms. I mean, we can get equalization changed. We can get, we might even be able to get unrestricted free trade across Canada, which is another one of our tenets. But if we don't actually change the way that the government governs this country, I'm going to be reading columns from 2045. And I'm like, I swear to God, I read this 25 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I think we might be getting to a bit of a crisis point to a deeper degree than we have in the past. What would you say about that?
I'd like to think so. I mean, the Supreme Court just ruled last week that the carbon tax was constitutional. And we view that as the way that the carbon tax is set up is that the provinces have to implement their own carbon tax that's acceptable to the federal government standards, or the federal government will unilaterally register their own. Now, in this case, because the carbon tax directly impacts the natural resource industry, the issue that was seen before the Supreme Court was that essentially this is, a jurisdictional fight. This is something where, like, provinces have control of their natural resources. It's something that Peter Lougheed fought to get in the Constitution in 1982. In fact, he wouldn't have agreed to it if it wasn't. And he was a driving force between actually getting the Constitution patriated because of that fact. But what this does is it essentially gives the power to the federal government to deem anything a national concern and use peace, order, and good governance section of the Constitution, which is very rarely used. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of precedence, but now, like, the carbon tax is peace, order, and good governance.
Yeah, like, wow.
So, like, and what's to stop them from using really anything of federal jurisdiction to essentially backdoor way around the Constitution? And so the carbon tax is just one example. And it's difficult for me to formulate what essentially could happen, but anything is of national concern. You can make that argument.
You can make that argument. Yeah.
So what this does is it gives Ottawa it centralizes power even more in a federation that really has a lot of distinct areas that won't have distinct needs. And like, it's going to create it. If we're not at a crisis yet, which I think we are, but I think the premier would disagree with me.
Right.
So I think we're at a crisis. I think we've been in a crisis for a long time. I know support for separation, outright separation, independent of what our neighboring provinces decide to do. So this is independent of Wexit. This is just Alberta pure. Is at 25%. Now, the court ruling got some attention, and we did a survey of our supporters last week as well. We had a busy week. And at the time, our supporters, like, the high end of the chart was at 27%. We're at a 10 for separation before the Supreme Court ruling.
10.
Which, Yeah, actually, I mean, it is skewed. I'm not gonna lie, it is skewed. Like I always say, about 50% of our support comes from people who are ready to leave,
right?
That view what our proposals are from the firewall initiative, which we haven't talked about, to abolishing equalization, which is something that the premier is committed to try and do, to the Senate reform. Our steps in the direction to independence, that we have to go through this in order to get out. Like this is the path to get out. And then 50% are people who are frustrated with the status quo and are not ready to leave, but they want to see meaningful changes. And so when I say 27% on the high end, that's not surprising, but it's almost in line with that 25% that are ready to leave today. So that would be a 10. That number jumped from 27% to 42% after the Supreme Court ruling.
Wow.
So this is internal data. So, I mean, it's not something that we didn't go commission a poll, but it was something that I found to be very, very interesting. I know the data is skewed, but if that's the case, and let's say maybe since the last poll, support for independence outright across the province has creeped up to 27%. And that Supreme Court ruling on the carbon tax knocks it up to 42, then we've got a real problem. Like, I've seen polls that have come out regarding the provincial government and its support across the province. And the UCP's polling at about, I saw one, and this probably will change, but it was 20% UCP, 40% NDP, and 60% undecided or something like that. But my numbers are way off. But I don't know what the undecided
60 was. Or 60, so it'd be 40 would be undecided.
I think there was yeah.
If it's 40,
10 other parties. I didn't look it up before it came out, so I don't quote me on the numbers. But the support for rural Alberta, I think it was 14% UCP, 24% NDP. No, 24 UCP, 34 NDP, 32 undecided. And I know Kenny's been hit from rural Alberta on the lockdowns, and that's not something I think we'll touch on today, but it's one of those things where there are people who are frustrated with the lack of action. And Kenny himself, after the Supreme Court ruling, said that they weren't ready. They thought they were going to win, and they didn't have a plan B. And I'm sitting there like,
how do you not have a plan B for something that important?
You put this in motion.
Yeah, this was your plan.
Yeah. How do you, and I think that's a big reason why that undecided vote's getting there. He won with 55% of the vote. His campaign, I mean, I had my criticisms of it, but it was the red meat campaign that Albertans love. And he has not followed through on any of it. But at the same time, he still has half of his term. If he turns around and starts coming hard on the fair deal stuff, that is red meat that UCP voters are going to eat up. And if he listens to this, which I'm not sure he does, but I hope he does.
Right.
I'll throw a plug in here. Mr. Premier, I hope you're listening.
Yeah, exactly.
But I really hope that you actually step up to the plate here and start pushing harder. And maybe that is his plan. Maybe because the Wild Rose Independence Party is popping up on the right, they look like they're poised to take up some of the voters on that undecided vote in rural Alberta. But if he pushes the fair deal panel, essentially all the recommendations, he takes the Wild Rose Independence platform right out of their hands.
Yeah, they wouldn't have anything. Yeah,
they wouldn't have anything. So I do think that he may not think it's a crisis yet, but I mean, if I'm in the Premier's office right now, my hair is on fire and I'm running around in circles because I'm seeing the numbers on the wall. And
those aren't good numbers.
No, they're not. So I hope he's listening, and I hope he listens in on this. I don't think I've been too critical of him. So
no, you haven't. On that note, on the note of campaigns and activism and all that kind of stuff, what have you enjoyed most about founding Project Confederation and the project itself?
I have a great deal of independence to make judgment calls based on the way that I feel things are going. I do rely very heavily on Peter. He's one of the most brilliant men I've ever had the opportunity of working with. But Yeah, it's the independence. It's the ability to, I don't have to read from a script that's given to me by, campaign office.
Right.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
This is something I get to write the op-eds. Like the coolest thing, like I remember the first op-ed I wrote in the Calgary Sun and seeing my name in there and like how excited I got up at like 7 a.m. and I went to the new, like,
I got the newspaper.
I went to I went to 7-Eleven. I bought the newspaper. I found my article in there. I'm like, standing there, like, there's a guy in front of me and lied, and I'm like looking at him, like, should I say something? Like, that's me. and it's all like, yeah, you get the first op-ed out there, and then you give your first speech in front of a room of 400 people, and it's a speech that I wrote, and it's. It's incredibly empowering from a certain extent, and it's a confidence builder. Like 6-7 years ago, I got into politics and I was following my gut, and I knew that I believed that my instincts were right in following the path that I followed. I mean, there's part of me still that is not 100% convinced that if we hadn't merged in with the PCs, that the Wild Rose would have been able to beat the NDP.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think it would have been hard.
It would have been hard. It probably would have happened, though. I mean,
it probably would have, but like we just don't know.
We don't know. Yeah, but I mean, it's one of those things where like I always followed my judgment and my gut, and sometimes people thought I was making terrible decisions. I remember when I quit the UCP in 2018 that people thought I was crazy. I look like a genius.
That's
now,
true. It's true. I thought you were crazy.
Yeah. No, like everybody like what have I been saying for 2 years? Yeah, check the poll numbers.
Yeah. No. I was right.
Yeah. So I mean, it's one of those things where as things have kind of started to play out, and I'm pretty good at reading the tea leaves. I do have a lot of faith that Jason Kenney's going to follow through. I mean, even if he does, it might not be enough. I know people are like, he could lose rural Alberta even if he does. I mean, people are getting.
And without rural Alberta, there's no path.
No, I mean, rural Alberta, like, yeah, there's 20 seats in Edmonton and 20 seats in Calgary, and I'm give or take, I think 22. But there's like 40 seats in rural.
Yeah,
like, if
exactly.
you can't win rural, you're dead. Like,
this was actually the NDP's problem all along, right? Is that they're never going to be accepted outside of the two major centers, and maybe they'll get two in Lethbridge. And, they got the Red Deers once, but those people weren't voting for the NDP. Those people were voting to get rid of the PCs because they were tired of them.
And then what did? We reelected them. I mean,
yeah, well, I mean, that was not what we were promised, but
no, it wasn't. And it's one of those things that's frustrating to watch. But I mean, yeah, I think that Jason's path to victory goes through the fair deal. And so I'm not going to make any rash decisions or criticize him too harshly. I wish he was doing more. I mean, I don't understand like why we don't have a police force or a pension plan yet.
Yeah. That's pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
Quebec's already got both.
Well,
so does Ontario.
Plus, like the Supreme Court too, like the Supreme Court ruling was before March 31st. The opt-out date for the RCMP is March 31st. Like it should have happened. Like this is the thing, like you can't set a plan in motion and not actually
do anything
plan
and not do anything.
Chips are down. Yeah, not do anything. Like that was the thing that shocked me. Actually, I was expecting like the Supreme Court. We expected the ruling. I expected the ruling. Like we wrote a draft email that went out with our analysis like the night before. We only had one. We were going to lose. Like that was
right.
What we expected.
We
just knew we were going to lose. And he comes out there. He's like, "Oh, I thought we were going to win. We didn't. We didn't have a plan of attack if we lost." Like. I was shocked. I was shocked that like I expected, we're coming out. Okay, this is the day that we are withdrawing from the Canadian pension plan.
Yes.
And starting our pension plan. This is the day that we are starting our own police force. This is the day that, you don't have to have a referendum to do those things. You don't have to have, constitutional changes to do those things. So you have to do everything within your power. And the problem that Justin Trudeau is having right now with defending the Canadian energy sector is that nobody's taking him seriously because he's constantly attacking it. Yeah. Right? Like,
exactly.
Like, and so my thing now is I'm watching this go on. And from a strategic standpoint, by not doing anything when you're the guy that put step A and step B in play with the Supreme Court, you had it, you went through the Court of Appeals of Alberta, you won. Good work. Then you go to Ottawa and you lose. The thing is now the chip, stakes are a little bit higher, right?
Yeah,
you don't have a plan. You don't have a plan. And it's just, how are you actually going to go to Ottawa in a year and a half and have them taking you seriously when you haven't done anything? All you've done is you've gone around, you've had a fair deal panel that put together a good but not substantially great report, which seemed like it wasn't necessarily representative of the rooms I was in, at least in some degree. But you had a fair deal panel, good. But what's been done since then? And I know COVID's the front of mind issue, but there's other things going on,
and COVID isn't going to last forever, despite what some governments in this country would like, I think.
No, unless we find out that the vaccine is actually a zombie.
It's actually spreading.
Thing, yeah. We're all turning into zombies now. Whoops.
Honestly, at this point, I wouldn't even be surprised. I'd be like, that's par for the course.
That sounds normal now.
Yeah, it sounds normal. My doors are already barricaded. Yeah, we're good.
I've already bought all my guns. We're good.
Yeah, we're good. So no, I mean, it's one of those things where I know it's a front of mind issue. I've heard people say that Kenny doesn't want to be the guy with millions of deaths on his hands, and so he's taking, and I understand that, and it's sometimes it's difficult for people to understand that that's what his mindset is, but man, if we don't get real action on this in 2 years, or he could be out, or worse, we end up with an NDP government that doesn't support any of this, and actually wants to have, it didn't work for him before, but it's just one of those things where it's so frustrating to watch. It's like he's floundering. And a part of it too, is it seems like they hired a bunch of people from outside the province to come in.
They utterly did. It's true.
And it's, I'm not saying they're not talented people, but they don't really understand the history of the province and why the Wild Rose Party came out of the woodwork.
Yeah, they honestly think that the party is united now, when really what's happened is the old PCs took over this new shell corporation, and the Wild Roses are already all gone. All of them.
Yeah.
Do you know a single Wild Roser right now that is supporting Kenny?
I'd say Brian Bateson, probably.
Oh, I guess so. Yeah.
I mean, there's always going to be one or two examples. I agree with you, though. I do agree with you that the spirit of the Wild Rose inside the party it's not there. No. And so you're even seeing it, you're seeing frustration on CA boards now. There is a movement to have a leadership review. Of course, that was widely covered, but I don't know. I mean, I view the spirit of the Wild Rose was essentially sucked out of it's, I don't know. There's that scene. This is terrible. So in Harry Potter,
love it. Let's go.
The Dementors.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. They're just sucking the life out of the Wild Rose. This is, and I'm sorry to all the PCs in the UCP that are listening to this, but sorry, that's what I think. That's the way it looks, and I don't know. Jason Kenney, when he came back to Alberta and he bought that blue Dodge Ram and he's driving around, everybody's like, this is the guy. This is
everyone.
One of us. He's one of us. He understands this. I mean, he was in the Canadian Taxpayers Federation during the reform movement as it grew. And
one of the first elected reform MPs.
One of them. Wow, he was 97, but he was one of the first.
That was their big batch, right? I guess 93 was their big batch.
93 was their big batch, but I think they retained most of their seats. But he got in 97, and he was our guy. He understood what was going on. He understood the frustration. He'd been around long enough. He was, went to high school or junior high or wherever in Wilcox, Saskatchewan.
Yep.
Just this rural kid that understood what was going on, educated, son of a principal. His grandpa is, one of the most respected musicians in Saskatchewan, he's our guy. And he gets in there and he brings in all these people from Ottawa, the federal party, that understand that the Conservatives have won in Alberta forever, but that seems to be the extent of their knowledge, because there's been a lot of really preventable things, and even like comms. Like, I know it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. I know.
But geez, like I remember 2014 August, when nothing was going on, except like it was before the whole Redford plane scandals happened. I mean, I wasn't involved in politics, but I read the news every day and I listened to the talk shows. And there was this whole fiasco. They were changing the slogan on the license plate.
Yes, I remember, because they're trying to take out the Wild Rose.
Yeah, and I'm like sitting there like, how do you manage to do that? Like, how did you not think this was a bad idea?
It looks rapidly partisan. It
does. How do you? I wasn't even mad about it. Like, I'm like, it's a license plate. I don't care. But like, how am I reading this on the front page of the newspaper every day for a month?
Yeah.
And now I'm sitting there and I'm like, there's been a number of issues that have happened. I mean, Vacation Gate, for example.
Oh, yes, yes.
I mean, Kenny's excuse is, well, we didn't issue a directive for them not to leave. It's like, well, do you have to issue a directive to not lick a flagpole? Like,
well, and hey, you people who are literally trapping people in their homes and not allowing them to see their families at Christmas, maybe don't travel.
Yeah, you stay home, don't see your family.
Yeah.
But I've got a family tradition. Yeah. I got a tradition I got to get to in Hawaii. So,
but don't see your family.
Yeah, don't see your family. Yeah, I mean, it's just like these things that, like, yeah, I know, like, and it's the simplest things that always become the biggest scandals. And I see a lot of similarities between the late stage PC party and a lot of these government departments that are out there, and that they don't understand. It's a lack of awareness of what the people, especially in rural Alberta, are really feeling. And even like the cities, like, yeah, sure, there are a lot of people that move here from the east and move into the cities, but there's still a lot of people like that grew up on a farm in Standard, Alberta, that have, or even like the Minister of Energy grew up in Chancellor, which is in between Standard and Hazard, like that moved to the cities, and that they're a huge part of the culture there. And it's just, it's one of those things where it's you got to understand those people, and I feel like this government doesn't. Like, even even the MLAs, they seem to be, you know, yes men, and you got staffers that are yes men, and there's no independent thought. It's just everything's coming out of the premier's office, and I'd like to see them, you know, step their game up, because the last thing I want to see is the vote split in another NDP government, because for 4 years, like,
that was hell. Yeah,
that was hell. And, you know, like, this is traditionally Alberta's the bastion of conservative thought, you know, like, for better part of 25 years, the Calgary School of Economists dominated, you know, conservative political thinking in this country.
Exactly.
And
no, true.
You know, yet our provincial government, which is supposed to be representing, you know, our province, is bringing in, you know, some of the brightest minds from Ontario and BC.
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing?
It's like, you know, I'd like to see them be better. I mean, I really would. I'm cheering for these guys, but I am. This is a crisis, and they need to start recognizing that there is a crisis, especially in terms of intergovernmental affairs. And
I honestly believe that they are under the misconception that the separatist movement will never get off the ground because it's run by a bunch of amateurs, right? I think would be the argument. And I just think that is very foolish, because, you know, nature abhors a vacuum, right?
Yeah. I agree.
It will fill this vacuum.
And then maybe that is their thinking, but the Wild Rose after the floor crossing still wiped the PCs.
Yes, exactly,
like,
exactly.
I mean, like, this was a rag. You basically, what happened in 2014 was you had a floor crossing, and you had essentially everybody go over to the PCs.
Yeah, the opposition crossed the floor. It's never happened before in parliamentary democracy. Ever.
Four was it 4 or 5? I think it was five MLAs. Yeah. Left 5 MLAs out of 14 over there. The leader of the party went.
It's literally never happened before.
They had to have a GoFundMe.
Parliamentary democracy.
They had to get a GoFundMe for staff Christmas presents.
I remember. Yeah.
And so they still became official opposition.
Yeah, I know.
That's how bad that's how bad the PCs were. And if that's what their assumption is, that they're never going to get off the ground. Yeah, okay. You thought you were nutting the Wild Rose.
Yes.
7 years ago or 6 years ago, and here we are today. A lot of the same PC people are in positions of authority within the government. I mean,
and where are the Wild Rosers? I guess Brock Harrison is a Wild Roser.
Yeah,
Evan Menzies.
They've got a few, but it feels like the spirit's gone.
Yeah.
You have Wild Rosers, but they're just old staffers. And,
right.
They a lot of staffers don't I remember working in Drumheller Stetler on Strankman's campaigns, and just Wild Rose would send out people to, and they just were like, okay, well, we got to get these signs here, and here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a 3-hour drive from one end of the riding to the next.
Exactly.
You got to get these. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing. I understand it. You're from the city, you don't get it. But there's, it's a culture in Edmonton. There is a culture in Edmonton, and it's this bureaucratic nightmare that seems to dome disease almost.
That's a pretty well documented. Yeah. So we only got 4 or 5 more minutes here, but I wanted you to share with the listeners your love of hockey fights, because I'll never forget that conversation that you and I had at Denton's house where you explained it. It just changed my whole perspective on hockey fights. So it's just a fun Canadian story.
Yeah. So I'm a huge hockey fan.
Who's your team?
Calgary Flames, obviously. It's been a rough year, but
well, for the first time in a long time, the Leafs are doing well, so I'm feeling good.
Yeah, until the second round of the playoffs.
Well, yeah, I don't know if we'll ever win a second round playoff game.
Just wait until Brandon Gallagher high sticks someone in Game 7, and you'll be having a different conversation. No claw.
I don't want to talk about
hockey fight. So in hockey, essentially, you'll get you get into these skirmishes, and back in the day, in the 80s, 70s and 80s, there was, a lot of fighting. And even the 90s, there was a lot of fighting. They had goons and stuff like that. But one of my I can't remember exactly the context that you're talking about, but my favorite fight in hockey that I ever saw was, I think it was 1997. And Colorado were playing Detroit. And in 96, there was something happened. I think Claude Lemieux did something to somebody. Claude Lemieux was kind of a pest. And so he got jumped in the next game they played against each other, and he's getting the tire beat out of him because he didn't see it coming. And then obviously, since he got jumped, somebody else decided to jump in on it. And so next thing you know, there's Brendan Shanahan's got somebody, and he's beating the stuffing out. Brendan Shanahan went on to become the NHL's director of player safety. So
that's amazing. I didn't know that.
Wow.
So he's beating the stuffing out of somebody, and there's a great clip. And then Patrick Waugh, of course, the fiery former Montreal Canadiens goaltender, decides, I've had enough of this. So he comes flying out. Oh, no. Actually, what happened was somebody was beating some Red Wings guy was beating the crap out of a Avalanche guy, and Patrick Waugh comes flying out because he's gonna, he's gonna
get in there.
Lay some pain.
He's gonna get in there. And all you see is Brendan Shanahan come into the fray with just like midair collision, sticks flying. And then Mike Vernon, the goalie of the Red Wings, comes out. Like then there's a goalie fight at center ice, and I don't know who won that game, but that was.
It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
No.
It's just Brendan Shanahan, featured director of NHL
player safety, just going at it.
Man,
I
understand. Like, I think the new icing rules, that's great. Like, people aren't crashing into the boards. Like, I understand preserving player safety, and I get it, and I have sympathy for that. But I grew up watching Ty Domi run the show on the Leafs, and it's like there's that element of hockey has dwindled. And I mean, I hope one day to have a son, and I'm sad to think that he will not grow up knowing hockey. Like I grew up knowing hockey.
The old days.
well, Josh, but I want you to go more into, as a hockey player, which you played a lot of hockey. What does fighting mean in hockey?
It's one of those things where there's a code. Like, I mean, there are guys that run around the ice and they're chippy and they're, hitting from behind, or those dirty little slashes behind the legs, and they're annoying. And every now and again, they'll catch somebody at the wrong time, and the guy's had a bad game, maybe rung a couple off the post, and or maybe took a maybe the team's not playing very well, and you need to get a spark. But it's about teammates. It's about camaraderie. It's about being in the dressing room. And if you've got somebody on your team that's getting hammered and getting hit, and there's a dirty play, maybe he gets hit from behind, like somebody's got to step up and do something. You got to be there for your boys. And that was one of the things that, like, for the Flames, for example, that set off this whole trajectory of having the coach fired. Was Matthew Tkachuk's one of those guys that does get the team into the game. I mean, he does a lot of chippy shit. Like
he's a chipper. He's a chipper for sure.
Like falling on an injured goalie, for example, accidentally on purpose. Right. Like, I mean, and everybody knows he's doing it, but like, that's the kind of thing where he does it. And then all of a sudden the other team's mad at you. And now you have to play hockey. Now you have to skate harder because they're mad. They want to hit you. They want to do things. And there's an element of that comes into the game, and it's competitiveness. But every now and again, like somebody's gonna do something that's a little bit over the line, and you got to go to bat for your teammate. And if that means dropping the gloves, that means dropping the gloves. And so, like that's the way it's all about. Like, okay, sure, it's glorified violence and all that, but no, it's about having your teammates' backs, because I'll guarantee you, like, if you get into a good tilly and you head back into the dressing room afterwards, if you're defending somebody on your team in that fight, like,
you're a hero.
Everybody in the room is looking at you and saying, "Yeah, that's my teammate," and it builds camaraderie in the room. And you can't win hockey games if you're not reading from the same book. And it's hard to read from the same book when there's no camaraderie in the room. Like, there's no teammate, there's no slapping each other on the back. There's no, going out for beers after the game or whatever. Like, I mean, it's about teammates. It's about having a strong room and fighting. It's from that respect, it's very much a part of the game. And it frustrates me to take that out. And I think because in the NHL, especially, you're seeing it where, like there's guys that, they don't seem to want to. They're making millions of dollars and they're money makers, and they're skating around with their flow and they're hot
that's not hockey.
Decking themselves out in the glass and they just like they don't want to engage in physical hockey because they're highly trained professional athletes. And like it's about the dressing room. It's not about the physicality. It's about your teammates knowing that you have their back. That's really all it is.
That's why I like watching provincial level games. So it's the OHL here in Ontario, and my team's the Kitchener Rangers. And when you go see Rangers games, I mean, yes, the NHL players, they're faster, they're better players. The hockey is better, all of those things. But the OHL players are gunning for spots in the NHL. They're gunning for the big salary. They're gunning for all of those sorts of things. And
so man, more passion.
They play with fire.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that.
It's like the Red Deer Rebels. It's like the Red Deer Rebels. Like those guys are fucking, they're going.
It also helps when you're 16 and you're full of fire and vinegar.
Yeah, really, true.
18 would be,
And you can take a couple hits and like get up the next day.
Yeah.
Not only that, you take a couple hits and you're just like, who is that? 16. Oh,
yeah, all right.
Get 16.
Yeah, let's go.
I'm getting him. I'm getting him.
I'm getting him. Like, you might not get him. I'll get him.
I'll get him.
Watch me.
16. Oh, it was 17 that time. Next thing you know, you got, all the numbers from 11 through 25 on your hit list. So you're just flying around out there. You're engaged. That's what I like to see. Yeah.
That's hockey.
Yeah. That's
hockey.
It's a great game.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, Josh. Really appreciated your perspective, and also just thank you for what you're doing to try to save Confederation.
No, I appreciate that, and thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to listening to it.
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The CAD Story. That's The CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great their country is.